It wasn't the kind of day where anything seemed off. There were no alarms ringing, no red flags waving in the air. Everything was perfectly normal, or so I thought. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually makes me feel at ease. The kids were out, visiting their grandmother for the weekend, leaving just me and her, Elena. We had this routine where she liked to take long walks on Saturday afternoons, the kind where she'd put in her headphones and disappear for hours, leaving me to my thoughts. It was almost comforting, knowing that we had our own space, even within the same walls. But today was different. I tried calling her around 4 p.m., like I always did, just to check in. She usually picked up, always smiling when she saw my name on the screen. But this time, there was no answer. I let it go for a while. She'd occasionally get caught up in a conversation or lose track of time, so I didn't think much of it. But as the minutes turned into hours, I started to get that uneasy feeling, the one that creeps up in the back of your mind, making everything feel slightly wrong. I texted her, "Hey, you good?" I knew she would see it, and if she was busy, she'd get back to me. She always did. But no response. Another hour passed, and I found myself pacing the house, staring out the window, waiting for her to walk through the door. It was starting to get late, and I was beginning to feel that odd sense of worry, but I still couldn't put my finger on why. I tried calling again. This time, it rang, but when the voicemail picked up, I had this strange urge to leave a message. I never left messages. It felt too needy, but I did it anyway. "Elena, where are you?" I said, the words feeling unfamiliar in my own mouth. "Everything okay? Just give me a call when you get this." Then, something strange happened. Less than 5 minutes later, the phone buzzed. It was a missed call from her. I quickly pressed the screen to call her back, hoping this was just a delay or something mundane. But it wasn't. The call went straight to voicemail again. I hung up, confused. Elena never let calls go unanswered, especially not from me. I waited for a text, a message, something, but nothing came. That was when I started to notice the change in the house. I had been walking around, half-heartedly cleaning up, when I passed by the kitchen and stopped. Something was off, but I couldn't pinpoint it. The air felt different, charged somehow. I turned toward the counter and saw the little things that didn't belong. A coffee mug, but not the one she always used. The old necklace she used to wear around the house, sitting next to it, something she hadn't touched in months. The table, too. The way it was arranged seemed wrong, like it had been moved. It was subtle, but it hit me like a wave. I stopped dead in my tracks. I couldn't remember when she'd last worn that necklace. She stopped wearing it ages ago. My mind began racing as I tried to make sense of it. Elena was always careful with the small things. If she left something out of place, it meant something. But I couldn't get my thoughts straight. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was reading too much into nothing. The front door opened, and I turned, relieved to hear the familiar sound of her footsteps. But when I looked, it wasn't her. It was a man I had never seen before, standing in my doorway, looking as if he had every right to be there. He wasn't carrying anything, no bags, no sign of a visit, just his expression, calm, but with a hint of something I couldn't quite read. My heart skipped a beat. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice suddenly small. He looked at me for a long moment, almost too long. Then, his lips parted, and he spoke the words that hit me like a ton of bricks. "Elena sent me." I stared at him, trying to make sense of what was happening. "What do you mean, sent you?" I managed to say, my mind still struggling to keep up. "Who are you?" But before he could respond, the door to the hallway creaked open behind me, and there she was, Elena. But she wasn't the woman I knew. Her face was blank, her eyes distant. When she saw the man, she didn't flinch, didn't show any surprise. Just a nod, as though she had been expecting this moment. "This is David," she said, her voice flat, almost as if she were reading off a script. "He's an old friend. A friend from work." I looked between them, trying to figure out what I was missing. An old friend? From work? But nothing about this seemed right. There was a coldness in the room that wasn't there before. A sense of something wrong that I couldn't explain. David shifted slightly, stepping into the house without waiting for an invitation, as if he were already part of the scene. I felt the heat rise in my chest, the pressure building in my temples. What was going on? What was happening here? "Elena," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but failing. "Why is he here? What's going on?" Her eyes met mine, and for a second, I saw something, a flicker of guilt, maybe. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by an unreadable calm. She didn't answer me. Not right away. Instead, she just turned to David, nodded, and then walked past me, as if nothing was wrong. "Everything's fine, Alex," she said, her voice no more than a whisper as she walked down the hall. "Don't worry about it." But I did worry, and nothing would ever be the same again. I stood there in the doorway, my mind reeling. The air in the house felt thicker now, heavier. The man, David, walked in like it was the most natural thing in the world. Elena, my wife, barely spared me a glance as she moved toward the living room, her pace almost mechanical. The whole situation felt surreal, like I was trapped in a dream I couldn't wake up from. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but my voice wouldn't come. David, on the other hand, made himself at home immediately. He slid his jacket off and hung it over the back of a chair like he belonged here. It was like I wasn't even in the room. I had no idea who he was, why he was here, or why Elena had brought him into our home without a word to me. Every second that passed made the pit in my stomach grow deeper, and the tension was suffocating. "Elena, what is this?" I finally managed to choke out, my words stumbling over each other. My heart was hammering in my chest, each beat sending a shockwave of confusion and betrayal through me. She stopped in her tracks, her back still turned to me, and for a moment, I thought she might just keep walking, leaving me to figure this out on my own. But she didn't. She paused and took a deep breath, as though preparing herself for something she knew was coming, something she didn't want to say. Slowly, she turned to face me, but her eyes never quite met mine. Instead, they drifted to the floor, the weight of the silence between us growing unbearable. "This is not easy, Alex," she said, her voice softer than usual, almost distant. It was like she was talking to someone else, not me. Her tone didn't have the warmth it used to have. It didn't have the sincerity that I was used to. It was almost robotic, like she was repeating lines she had rehearsed over and over again in her mind. "David and we've been seeing each other for a while now." I didn't hear the rest of what she said. My mind went blank. I don't even remember the exact words she used after that. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I was falling, plummeting into a void where nothing made sense. How could she do this to me? To us? David, standing a few feet away, shifted his weight uncomfortably, like he wasn't sure if he should be part of the conversation or not. He cleared his throat, his gaze shifting from me to Elena. "We didn't want to hurt you," he said, his voice surprisingly calm for someone who had just dropped a bombshell on my life. "But it's been happening for a while now. We're not hiding it anymore." I felt the blood drain from my face. The audacity, the coldness in both of their voices was like a slap to the face. They had been seeing each other behind my back for God knows how long, and now they were just standing there, as if it were some sort of casual affair. Elena's eyes flickered up to meet mine for the first time since she entered the room, but there was no apology in them. No remorse, just a look of exhaustion, like she was done with trying to make this work. "I've been struggling, Alex," she said quietly, "for a while now. And David, he's been there for me. He understands me in ways you don't." Her words hit me like cold water. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. It was like I was hearing everything from a distance, as though I was no longer part of this conversation, no longer part of my own life. The room felt smaller with every passing second. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath shallow. It was all too much to take in. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lash out, to demand that they both leave and never come back. But I couldn't bring myself to say anything. The anger, the betrayal, the confusion, it all mixed together, choking me from the inside. David stepped forward, his presence almost too calm, too sure of himself. "Look, man," he said, his voice steady but somehow condescending. "This wasn't easy for either of us, but it's out in the open now. There's no point in pretending anymore. Elena and I cut him off. I couldn't let him finish that sentence. "Don't," I spat, my voice barely a whisper, but filled with enough venom to make it clear that I wasn't going to just sit there and let this happen. "Don't talk like you have any right to be here. You've ruined everything." For the first time, Elena's eyes flickered with something resembling guilt, but she quickly masked it, turning away from me as though she couldn't bear to face the consequences of her actions. "I never meant for it to hurt you, Alex," she said, but her words felt empty. "But I can't live a lie anymore." I felt my legs give way beneath me, and I collapsed onto the couch, my hands trembling as I tried to wrap my head around what had just happened. The woman I had loved, the woman I had given everything for, was standing there, coldly explaining how she had fallen out of love with me. And now she was with someone else. I wanted to scream, to ask her why. Why didn't she come to me? Why didn't she talk to me before it came to this? But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. I could only stare at her, helpless. David and Elena exchanged a look, one that seemed to carry a conversation between them, a silent agreement. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just some brief mistake. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a conversation or a tearful apology. They had planned this, both of them. This had been going on for far longer than I ever realized. Elena walked over to the door, not looking back at me. "I'm sorry, Alex. But I need to go," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. She opened the door and stepped outside, leaving me alone with David. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mind was still trying to process what had just happened, still grappling with the rawness of the moment. Elena was gone, and now I was left with this stranger in my living room, a man who had stolen my wife, my life, without a second thought. David stood there for a moment, awkwardly shifting from foot to foot, his eyes not meeting mine. Finally, he broke the silence. "I'll go too," he said, his voice almost sympathetic. But there was nothing sympathetic in his eyes. Nothing except cold indifference. "Take care of yourself, man." He walked out of the door, leaving me in the silence of my empty home, surrounded by the pieces of a life that had just shattered. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just sat there, staring at the door they had just walked through, the door that would never be the same again. I sat there, my body numb, staring at the door they had just walked through. It felt like a dream, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The reality of what had just happened was too overwhelming. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to understand how it had all gone so wrong, but nothing made sense. Elena, the woman I had shared my life with, had left me for another man. And worse, she didn't even seem to care about how much it hurt me. It was as if she had already made peace with her decision, leaving me to pick up the shattered pieces of our life together. I looked around the house, everything still in its place. The living room, the kitchen, the photos of us on the walls. Everything was so normal. But it wasn't. Not anymore. The weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with every breath. I stood up slowly, almost mechanically, and walked over to the kitchen counter. Her phone was still there, lying where I had left it earlier, its screen cracked slightly from the fall. It felt like a lifeline, something familiar in a world that had just turned upside down. I picked it up again, hoping that some part of me could make sense of what had happened. The messages still flashed on the screen, like a taunting reminder of everything that had been kept from me. I opened the conversation with David, scrolling through the texts as if they held the key to some hidden truth I had missed. "I'll be there at 6, one message said. "We'll figure it out," read another. And then, at the very bottom, the final message, "I can't do this anymore. I'm with him now." I felt bile rise in my throat. The audacity, the callousness. They had been planning this for months, sneaking behind my back, lying to me at every turn. And yet, I still couldn't understand how Elena, my Elena, could do this to me. I had been a good husband, hadn't I? I had worked hard, provided for us, and always tried to make her happy. But it had never been enough. The man she wanted wasn't me. He was someone else, someone who could give her something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I threw her phone down on the counter, my hands trembling as I tried to control the anger that was bubbling up inside of me. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lash out at something, anything, to release this pressure. But I couldn't. I didn't even know where to begin. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of being alone. Terrified of the idea that my entire marriage had been a lie. Terrified of what came next. I sat down on the couch, my head in my hands, trying to steady my breathing. But the silence in the house was suffocating, and my thoughts kept spiraling out of control. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about Elena. Had she been unhappy for a long time? How had I missed all the signs? Had I been too blind, too absorbed in my own world to see that she had already checked out of our marriage? The more I thought about it, the more questions popped up, each one more painful than the last. What did they talk about when they were together? What did he give her that I couldn't? Was I not enough for her in the end? I felt a deep sense of humiliation, a raw ache in my chest. I had given everything to her, and now she was gone. and there was nothing I could do to change that. The next few hours were a blur. I tried to call Elena again, hoping for some kind of answer, some kind of explanation. But she didn't pick up. Her voicemail greeted me, cold and indifferent. "You've reached Elena. Leave a message," it said, as if nothing had happened, as if the woman I had spent years with hadn't just walked out of my life without warning. I wanted to leave. I wanted to pack my bags and drive away, as far away from this nightmare as I could get. But I couldn't bring myself to move. I couldn't bring myself to leave this house, this place that had once felt like home. The walls felt like they were closing in, the memories of our life together turning into a crushing weight. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. It couldn't be Elena, not after what had just happened. So who could it be? I hesitated, standing still for a moment, unsure of whether or not I should answer. But then the doorbell rang again, this time more insistently. I walked to the door, my heart still racing. I wasn't sure what to expect. But when I opened it, I was met with a face I didn't recognize, a man, perhaps in his late 20s, standing there with a slight smile on his face. He was dressed casually, but there was something about his presence that immediately felt off. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the tension in the air. The man nodded, his smile faltering slightly. "Are you Alex?" he asked, his voice low, almost too quiet. I felt my pulse quicken. "Yeah, that's me. Who are you?" "My name is Mark," he said, his smile widening a bit. I'm a friend of Elena's. We've been talking for a while. She wanted me to come by and..." I didn't let him finish. "What the hell are you talking about?" My voice was rising now, the anger spilling out before I could stop it. "What do you mean a friend of hers? Who the hell are you?" Mark's eyes darted nervously, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his confident facade. "Look, I didn't want to make this harder than it already is," he began, shifting uncomfortably. "But Elena, she told me she was with you, that she was married. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "What the hell do you mean, she told you? What is going on?" Mark took a step back, looking over his shoulder as if he was expecting someone else to appear. "Elena's not the woman you think she is," he said, his voice suddenly trembling. "There's more going on here than you know." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" But before he could answer, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around to find Elena standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Mark's face fell as he saw her, and she stepped forward, closing the door behind her. She didn't look at me, not once. She just stared at the floor, her hands clenched at her sides. I should have told you, Alex," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now it's too late. You need to know the truth." I didn't know what to think anymore. What was happening? Was this the end of everything I had known? Or was there something else going on? Something darker, deeper than I could have ever imagined? I felt my hands shaking as Elena stood in the doorway, her face now void of the warmth and love I had once known. She seemed like a completely different person. The woman I had married, the woman I had built my life with, was no longer the same. And now, standing before me was a stranger, someone who had betrayed me in a way I couldn't comprehend. Mark stood behind her, his expression one of regret, like he knew more than he was willing to say. I turned back to Elena, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation, but nothing fit. How could this happen? Why was she doing this to me? What's going on? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the rawness of the question hanging in the air. "Why didn't you just tell me, Elena? Why all the lies?" She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she just stood there, looking at me, her gaze distant, as if she had already checked out of this moment. Mark shifted uncomfortably behind her, his hands in his pockets, as though unsure whether to intervene. The silence stretched on, making the air feel thick and suffocating. "I didn't know how to tell you," Elena said finally, her voice low, almost breaking. She glanced over at Mark for a second before looking back at me. "But you needed to know? It's not just about David. It's not just about me and him." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean? What else is there?" I had never felt so lost. It was like the ground beneath me had shifted, and I was struggling to keep my balance. I needed answers. "What's going on, Elena?" Her shoulders sagged as she took a step forward, closing the distance between us. But there was no warmth in her movement. There was no affection. Just emptiness. There's something you don't know about me, Alex, she said softly, almost too quietly. Something I've been hiding for a long time. I swallowed hard, trying to understand her words. What are you talking about? She took a deep breath, then looked me straight in the eye. I'm not who you think I am, she said, her voice now steady, but the weight of her words seemed to hit me like a ton of bricks. There's been something that I've been running from for years, and I thought I could keep it buried, keep it from affecting you. But it's catching up with me. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't process what she was telling me. My mind was still reeling from the revelation that she had been seeing someone else, and now she was telling me there was something more, something darker, that had been hidden all this time. Something more? I repeated, trying to make sense of the cryptic statement. What are you talking about, Elena? What could possibly be worse than what you've already done? Mark took a step forward, his expression now serious. It's not about what she's done, Alex, he said, his voice steady but laced with a kind of urgency. It's about what's been going on behind the scenes. Something that started long before you ever met her. I felt a chill run through me at his words. What could he possibly mean? What was he talking about? I turned to Elena, desperate for an explanation. But instead of answering, she simply nodded, as though conceding to whatever Mark was about to say. Alex, Mark began, his eyes meeting mine. There's a reason she's been so distant lately. A reason why things between you two changed. And it has nothing to do with you. He paused for a moment, taking in my expression. It's about her past. The things she's kept from you. The air seemed to freeze, the weight of his words sinking in. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down into an abyss I couldn't see. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. What do you mean her past? What's going on, Mark? He glanced at Elena, as if waiting for her to speak, but she stayed silent, her face unreadable. Finally, he let out a sigh and turned back to me. Elena wasn't just running from her past. She was hiding something dangerous. And I don't think she ever meant to bring it into your life, Alex. But now it's too late. I took a step back, trying to process the flood of information. What are you talking about? What's so dangerous? Elena finally spoke, her voice trembling as she broke the silence. There's a reason I've been pushing you away, Alex. There's a reason why I couldn't be the wife you wanted me to be. I didn't just fall out of love with you. I was afraid. Her eyes darted between Mark and me, as though unsure of what to say next. I've been running from something, Alex. Something I couldn't escape. My breath caught in my throat. I had no idea what she was talking about. My mind was swirling with questions, with confusion. What are you afraid of, Elena? I asked, my voice cracking. What is it? She closed her eyes for a moment, as though gathering the strength to say what she had been hiding for so long. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with something I couldn't place. Guilt, fear, maybe even shame. I've been part of something illegal, she said, her voice barely audible. Something I didn't want you to know about. I felt the world tilt beneath me. My heart was racing, my chest tight with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Illegal? I repeated, my voice rising. What the hell do you mean, illegal? Mark stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder as if to steady me. It's bigger than you think, Alex. Elena got involved with some people a long time ago. People who don't let go easily. And it's been following her ever since. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my thoughts racing. This was too much to take in. The woman I thought I knew had been living a double life, and now I was caught in the wake of it. How long, Elena? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. How long have you been hiding this from me? She looked down, her face pale, the guilt in her eyes unmistakable. I didn't want to drag you into it, Alex. I thought I could handle it on my own, that it would go away. But it didn't. Who are these people, Elena? I demanded, my voice rising with each word. What did you get involved in? Elena's gaze flickered to Mark, and then back to me. I can't tell you everything, Alex. But they'll come for me. And when they do, they'll come for anyone I'm close to. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the walls pressing in, and all I could think about was how my life had been turned upside down in the span of a few hours. The woman I had loved and trusted had been hiding something from me. Something dangerous, something I could never have imagined. And now, I was stuck in the middle of it. I didn't know what to do. My mind was overwhelmed, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I didn't know if I could believe her. I didn't know if I could trust her anymore. The woman who had promised me forever was now the woman who had dragged me into a nightmare I never asked for. And I had no idea how to get out. I felt like I was suffocating. The room around me seemed to close in, the walls pressing against my chest with every breath I took. Elena's words were still echoing in my mind, but none of it made sense. "I've been part of something illegal," she had said, her voice trembling with fear. She had been hiding this from me, from us, for years. And now, suddenly, it was all spilling out. I wanted to scream, to ask why she hadn't trusted me enough to tell me the truth. But there was something else, something deeper behind her words that made my stomach churn. Mark stood there, watching me, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't place. Was it pity? Guilt? Or was it something else entirely? I didn't know. I couldn't focus on him, not when Elena was standing right in front of me, her hands trembling at her sides, her face pale as she stared at the floor. I couldn't look at her. Not like this. Not after everything she had done. She had lied to me for months, perhaps even longer, and now she was telling me there were things even darker than her affair with David. Things that I couldn't even begin to understand. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What do you mean by illegal, Elena?" I asked, my voice shaking but determined. "What exactly have you gotten yourself into?" For a moment, Elena didn't answer. She just stood there, her head down, the weight of what she was about to reveal pressing heavily on her. I didn't know how long I stood there, waiting for her to speak, but it felt like an eternity. Every second felt like a new layer of my life was being peeled away, revealing something darker beneath the surface. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't read. "It started a few years ago," she began, her voice quieter now, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "I was working with a company, a legitimate one at first, but somewhere along the way, things started to change. There were people involved, people who had connections in places I never imagined. And slowly, little by little, I became part of it. I didn't know how deep it went until it was too late." I felt my breath catch in my throat. What was she saying? Was this some kind of confession? And what kind of people was she talking about? My mind raced as I tried to process her words. "I thought I could get out," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper now. "I thought I could just walk away, leave it all behind. But they didn't let me. And when I met you, Alex, I thought I had finally found a way out. I thought I could be normal, that we could have a life together. But I was wrong. They don't let go that easily." I was silent, my mind spinning with the implications of what she was saying. The life I thought I had with her, the love I thought we shared, it all felt like a lie now. I had no idea what she had gotten herself involved in, but it sounded like something out of a bad movie. And now, I was caught in the middle of it. Mark stepped forward, his face serious, his eyes locked on mine. "It's not just about her, Alex," he said quietly, his voice laced with urgency. "It's about you now, too. You're in this, whether you want to be or not." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean? What do you mean I'm in this?" He glanced at Elena, then back at me. "The people Elena got involved with, they're dangerous. And they don't care who gets hurt. If they think you're a threat, they won't hesitate to take you out. You're not safe anymore, Alex." The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, and my vision blurred for a moment. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "What are you talking about?" I managed to choke out. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Elena stepped forward, her hands shaking as she reached out to me, but I recoiled instinctively. I didn't want her near me. Not after everything she had said, everything I was hearing. "I never wanted you to be involved," she said, her voice breaking. "But it's too late. They know about you now, and they won't stop until they get what they want." The air seemed to grow colder, the weight of her words sinking in. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Who were these people? What had Elena gotten herself into? And why was I being dragged into this mess? I felt a wave of anger rise within me, but I was too overwhelmed to express it. Instead, I just stood there, my body stiff with tension. "What do they want from us, Elena? What do they want from me?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know, Alex. I don't know what they want. But I know they'll stop at nothing to get it. And they'll hurt anyone who stands in their way." I could see the fear in her eyes, the raw desperation. But it didn't change anything. It didn't change the fact that she had lied to me, that she had brought me into something dangerous without any warning. And now, because of her actions, my life was in danger too. Mark spoke again, his voice low, almost apologetic. "We need to get out of here, Alex. We need to move quickly. These people, they don't give second chances. The longer you stay, the more risk you're in. I felt my legs grow weak, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. My heart was racing, my thoughts scattered. Where do we go? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How do we escape this? Mark looked at me, his expression serious. We don't have time to waste. Elena knows some people who can help us. They're not the best option, but it's the only option we've got. I felt my stomach drop. What did that even mean? Who were these people Elena knew? And what were we supposed to do now? Alex, Elena said, her voice filled with pain, I'm sorry. I never wanted to drag you into this. But now, we don't have a choice. You have to trust me. You have to trust that I'm doing everything I can to protect you. I couldn't respond. I didn't know what to say. My world had just shattered, and all I could do was stand there, frozen in place, waiting for whatever came next. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in, and I had no idea how to get out of this nightmare. But there was one thing I did know for certain. I wasn't the same person anymore. The life I had with Elena, the life I thought I had built, it was gone. And now, the only thing left was survival. The weight of everything Elena had just revealed hung in the air like an oppressive fog. I felt like I was suffocating, unable to process what had happened or understand how it had all come to this. A few hours ago, everything had seemed normal. A life I had worked so hard to build, a woman I thought I could trust. Now, it felt like that life had been stolen from me, piece by piece, and I was left with nothing but the aftermath of a betrayal I never saw coming. Elena stood there, trembling, her face filled with a mixture of regret and fear. I could see the tears welling in her eyes, but it didn't matter. Nothing she said could change the truth. Nothing she said could erase the fact that she had kept this from me for years. She had kept me in the dark while she danced with danger, pulling me into a nightmare I didn't even know existed. I couldn't even look at her anymore. I turned away, pacing the room, trying to make sense of what was happening, trying to find something, anything, that would explain how I had ended up in this situation. But every time I tried to focus, my mind spiraled back to her words. I'm sorry, she had said. I never wanted to drag you into this. But here I was, standing in a house that no longer felt like home, surrounded by lies, fear, and the unknown. Mark was still there, hovering in the background, his face serious, his eyes hard. I could feel his gaze on me, the weight of his presence adding to the tension. He had told me that I was involved now, that I was part of this dangerous world that Elena had found herself entangled in. But what did that mean? What were these people capable of? And why was I so damn helpless in the face of all this? Mark, I finally said, my voice hoarse with a mix of anger and disbelief. Who are these people? What is this thing that Elena's gotten herself mixed up in? What's going on? Mark hesitated for a moment before speaking, his eyes flicking over to Elena, who stood silent, her hands clasped tightly together. I can't give you all the details, Alex. But I'll tell you this. These people don't play by the rules. They operate in the shadows, using connections and power that most people could never even imagine. Elena got caught up with them years ago, and they've been pulling the strings ever since. They didn't just want her for her skills or her knowledge. They've had their eye on her for a long time, and now they've set their sights on you too. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. I could feel my pulse quicken as I tried to comprehend what he was saying. What do you mean? They've set their sights on me, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart was hammering in my chest, my thoughts swirling in confusion. What do they want from me? I'm just a guy, just a regular guy. I don't know anything about this world you're talking about. Mark's face darkened, and I saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or perhaps regret. They want control, Alex. They want to use you as leverage. They know you're tied to Elena, and that makes you a target. They'll do anything to get what they want. And if you try to fight back or resist them, you'll be a casualty in their game. I felt the blood drain from my face. A target? I was just an innocent bystander in all of this, and now I was caught in the crossfire of something that felt bigger than anything I could handle. The fear and uncertainty gnawed at my insides. The man I thought I was, the life I thought I had, was slipping away faster than I could grasp it. Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling. Alex, please, you need to believe me. I never wanted this for you. I never wanted to bring you into this world, but now it's too late. They're coming for us, and I don't know how to stop them. I felt my fists clench at my sides. She sounded so helpless, so small. But it didn't matter. She had dragged me into this, whether she meant to or not. She had lied to me for years, hiding the truth from me, keeping me in the dark. And now I was trapped, caught in a web of lies and threats that I had no way of untangling. How do we stop them? I asked, my voice rough, barely containing the anger that was starting to rise within me. What do we do now, Elena? We can't just sit here and wait for them to come after us. Mark looked at me, his eyes hard. We run, he said simply. We leave everything behind and disappear. It's the only way to stay safe. My mind raced. Run? Disappear? How could I just walk away from everything I had known? I had a job, a life, a home. I had friends, family. I couldn't just give all of that up. But as I stood there, the reality of the situation settled in. I wasn't safe here. The people Elena had gotten involved with weren't going to let us go so easily. They would hunt us down, and if we didn't act fast, we'd be dead before we even realized what was happening. I turned to Elena, my chest tight with emotion. You're telling me to leave everything behind? Just like that? I shook my head in disbelief. What choice do I have, Alex? What choice do we have? They're not going to stop. They'll keep coming, and if we stay, we're only putting everyone we know in danger. The silence between us was deafening. I didn't know what to do, what to say. The life I had built, the future I had planned, was slipping through my fingers. All I could do was stand there, frozen, caught in the web of Elena's choices and the danger they brought with them. We have to move fast, Mark said, his voice urgent. We don't have time to waste. I know people who can help us, but we need to get out of here before they realize we're on the run. I nodded slowly, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, none of them comforting. My life had been turned upside down in the span of a few hours, and now I had to make a decision that would change everything. Escape, leave everything behind, and run for my life. And then, just as I was about to speak, the phone on the table rang. I froze. The sound was sharp, jarring. The room seemed to go quiet for a moment, as if everything had stopped. My heart skipped a beat, my blood turning cold. I looked at Elena, and her face went pale. She knew what that call meant. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of panic flashing across his face. Answer it, he said quietly, almost too quietly. It's them. I swallowed hard, my hand trembling as I reached for the phone. I didn't know what I was about to hear, but I knew it wasn't good. The voice on the other end would determine our next move, and it would determine whether or not we had any chance of surviving the nightmare we were caught in. I stared at the phone in my hand, the screen glaring up at me, the unknown number flashing ominously. I could feel the weight of the moment settle around me, each passing second stretching out into eternity. The room was suffocating, the silence deafening, broken only by the sound of my shallow breath. Elena stood behind me, her eyes wide, her face pale as she watched me with a mixture of fear and helplessness. Mark stood a few feet away, his gaze darting between the phone and me, his face tight with tension. This was it, the call that would decide our fate. I didn't know whether to pick it up or let it go to voicemail, but I knew one thing for certain. Avoiding it was no longer an option. My life, Elena's life, and everything we had left depended on what happened next. I took a deep breath and pressed the green button, my finger trembling as I connected the call. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that whatever came next, it would change everything. The phone crackled once, twice, and then there was a pause. And then, the voice came. Alex. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a greeting. It was just my name, spoken with a cold, calculated precision that sent a chill down my spine. The voice was deep, gravelly, and unmistakable. I had never heard it before, but I knew instinctively who it belonged to. Who is this? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt, trying to push the fear out of my chest. But the words felt hollow, useless. I knew who it was. I could feel it in my bones. You know who this is, the voice replied, the edges of the words sharp, like the blade of a knife cutting through the air. I've been watching you, Alex. I've been watching both of you. All of you. I felt my blood run cold. I glanced at Elena, her face now a mask of horror, her hands clenched at her sides. Mark was staring at me, his jaw clenched tight, his expression unreadable. Why? I managed to ask, my voice hoarse, though I wasn't sure what I was asking anymore. Why me? Why us? What did they want? The voice on the other end of the phone seemed to grow colder, darker. Elena made a mistake, the voice continued. A mistake she thought she could walk away from. But there's no walking away from us. You're in this now, Alex. You've both made a choice, and now you'll have to live with it. My mind spun. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to ask how they had found us, how they knew everything. But I couldn't get the words out. The powerlessness washed over me like a tidal wave. The truth was, we had no control over what was happening. None of this was in our hands anymore. Let me make this clear, the voice said, its tone taking on a dangerous edge. Elena can run, but she'll never be free. And you, Alex, you've made yourself a target. You're no longer safe. Not in this world. Not with us watching. I felt the walls close in around me. The air grew thicker, more oppressive. This wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. We were trapped. There was no way out. I wanted to scream, to demand that they leave us alone, but I knew that would change nothing. These people didn't care about what we wanted. They didn't care about our lives, our safety. They only cared about control, power, and manipulation. And we were nothing more than pawns in their game. How do we stop this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the words heavy with desperation. There was a pause on the other end, a long silence that felt like an eternity. Then, the voice spoke again, slow and deliberate. You don't stop it, Alex. You can't. You only survive it. If you're lucky. I felt my stomach drop. The gravity of the situation crashed down on me like a ton of bricks. We weren't dealing with ordinary criminals or shady individuals. These were people with power, people who had influence that stretched far beyond anything I could comprehend. And they were closing in on us, tightening the noose around our necks. Get out, the voice said abruptly, breaking through my thoughts. Disappear. You'll never be able to outrun us, but we'll give you a head start. Consider it a gift, for now. Don't think you can hide forever, though. We'll find you. The line went dead with a sharp click, and just like that, everything went silent. I stood there, staring at the phone, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Elena was still standing behind me, her face drained of color, her body trembling as if she had just been struck. Mark let out a long breath, his face hardening as he looked at me. This is what we're dealing with, he said, his voice low, filled with dread. These people won't stop. They never stop. And they'll come after everyone you care about. I dropped the phone onto the table, my hands shaking. What do we do now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It wasn't a question for Mark. It was a question for myself. What was I supposed to do? How could I protect myself, or Elena, from something so big, so terrifying? Mark's expression darkened. We run, he said again, more firmly this time. We leave. Tonight. I felt a surge of panic rising in my chest. Where will we go? I demanded, the uncertainty of the situation overwhelming me. How can we possibly hide from people like this? Mark's eyes flicked to Elena, then back to me. I know a place, he said quietly. A safe house. But it's not foolproof. We'll have to move quickly, stay off the grid. If they know where we are, we're done. I couldn't breathe. The world I had known, the life I had built, was slipping away with every passing second. There was no running from this. There was no hiding. I was no longer just a man whose life had been interrupted. I was a man on the run, a man with a target on his back. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Let's go, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible, as she stepped toward me, her hand reaching out for mine. I didn't know what to say. There were no more words, no more promises. Only the harsh reality that our lives were no longer our own. The only thing left was survival. And whatever came next, I had no idea how I was going to make it out alive. The night seemed darker than it had ever been as we stepped into the car, the engine rumbling to life, a low hum of sound that seemed to echo the heaviness in my chest. Elena sat beside me, her eyes hollow, but there was something new in the way she held herself. A quiet determination. I had never seen her like this before, and despite the fear that gripped me, I couldn't help but feel that there was a part of her still fighting, still wanting to reclaim the life we had before all this. Mark was in the back seat, his eyes scanning the dark streets behind us, his mind clearly working overtime to map out the safest route. We've got about an hour before we hit the safe house, he said quietly, his voice steady but betraying a hint of the urgency that had been building in all of us. After that, we can figure out our next move. But right now, we need to stay low. I nodded, my hands gripping the steering wheel, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the call, to the cold, merciless voice on the other end. We had no illusions now. We were not just running from them. We were running for our lives. And yet, as I drove, something shifted inside me. I had a choice. I could let fear define me, let it consume me and paralyze me with hopelessness. Or I could choose to keep moving forward, keep fighting for something better, something more than the life I had left behind. I glanced over at Elena. She was staring out the window, but her jaw was set in that familiar way that told me she wasn't giving up. She wasn't just surviving. She was going to fight for us, for me. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most I could ask for right now. We drove for what felt like hours, the city lights fading behind us as we took winding roads through unfamiliar terrain. My mind raced with thoughts of everything that had led us to this point. The lies, the betrayals, the darkness that had overtaken our lives. But with every passing mile, I felt a sliver of hope grow inside me. We had made it this far. We were still alive. And as long as we were breathing, there was still a chance. The safe house wasn't much, just a small cabin tucked away in the woods, far from any major road or city. But as we pulled up to the entrance, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in days, I could breathe without that constant pressure on my chest. We were safe, for now. And that was enough. We stepped out of the car, the cold night air rushing in to meet us. Mark led the way inside, his steps quick and purposeful. I helped Elena inside, and for a moment, we both just stood there, taking it all in. The silence, the peace, the stillness. It felt like a different world, a world where we didn't have to worry about what was coming next. We had made it here, together, and that was all that mattered. Inside the cabin, the fire was already burning in the hearth, casting a soft, warm glow that made everything feel a little more real, a little more hopeful. Elena sat down on the couch, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like forever. I joined her, sitting beside her, and for a moment, we just sat in silence, letting the crackling of the fire fill the void. Mark sat across from us, his expression softer now, less tense. "We'll stay here until we're sure it's safe," he said, his voice calmer. "We can figure out our next move when the time comes. But for tonight, we've got a roof over our heads. And that's something we didn't have before." I looked over at Elena, and she met my gaze. There was no more fear in her eyes, just the quiet, unwavering strength that I had fallen in love with all those years ago. She had made mistakes, yes, but so had I. And yet, here we were, together, facing the future not with dread, but with a renewed sense of purpose. "We'll be okay," I said softly, reaching out to take her hand in mine. It felt like a simple gesture, but in that moment, it was everything. "We'll make it through this. We're stronger than we know." Elena squeezed my hand, a small but genuine smile tugging at her lips. "I know," she whispered. "I know." As the fire burned low and the night stretched on, I allowed myself to believe in something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. It wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead was uncertain, and there would be more challenges, more obstacles, more darkness to face. But for the first time in a long while, I knew that we would face it together. Whatever came next, we had each other. And that, in the end, was all that really mattered. The world outside might have been dark and dangerous, but inside this little cabin, with Elena by my side, I found a light I thought I had lost. And I knew that no matter what, we would survive. Together. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe in a future that could be brighter, a future where we could heal, rebuild, and maybe even find a little peace. We had survived the darkness. Now, it was time to step into the light.